Uh, it is, even though it's very short, it's a very powerful portion. And it's one of those times when you're going to hear me say it. I'm saying it right now, and I'm on Facebook, and I have said it before about this portion. So you know that I'm not making stuff up. It contains one of my favorite lines in the entire Torah. It is that time when we read this part of the portion, and I like to say, and I'm going to let a couple more folks in right now so they can hear it. And they've heard me say it before, probably, because some of them have been here in previous years. This very short portion contains one of my favorite lines in the entire Torah. And when we get to it, if you've been with us for a few years and you've read NItzavim with us before, you'll know that I said it, and it'll be familiar. And you know, I sometimes say it. I'll say this is one of my favorite lines. This is one of those for sure, and I mean that. And so it's a very short portion, but I'm glad for those of you who are here, you get to share it with us. It's the last Torah portion traditionally of the year. Before we get into Rosh Hashanah, then we have those other portions from Deuteronomy that we read at the end, and then Genesis at the beginning. This is our last portion of the year. We will have class next Wednesday, which is at the end of Rosh Hashanah. The following Wednesday, we don't have class because it's Yom Kippur, but we will finish up with the Torah together. And as I was just telling, I was telling everybody who was here at the beginning early, we are going to have a Simchat Torah. We're planning on doing Simchat Torah live. We will stream it. It should be a very freiliche and enjoyable and joyous day, which is what it's supposed to be. And our plan is to have a small klezmer. Well, there's not really a large klezmer band usually, but it's going to be a klezmer band, four or five piece, three.
That's actually big for a klezmer band, isn't it? 4 or 5.
Yes. So it'll be 3 to 5 klezmer. It will be live. It'll be streamed. It'll be, God willing, people in person, dancing, celebrating, having fun.
I'll be there in person, but I won't dance.
Okay. Well, you don't have to dance, but you can kind of sway. You can kind of sway with the music. Yeah. And by the way, you're a country square dance, line dancing person. Why?
I don't line dance. I square dance.
Square dance.
And I ballroom dance.
Okay. Well, pretend like you're ballroom dancing. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you'll have an opportunity if you feel like it to hold the Torah.
And by then, we know the Dodgers are going to win the West, so maybe I will dance.
Hopefully tonight it'll be at least back in the lead. All right, folks. And by the way, as I said, you'll be able to watch a lot of the game tonight. It's Corey Seager bobblehead night.
I wanted though. You know what I want though, Rabbi? If you go to that game, I want Climbing the Sword bobblehead.
When is that game? When is that game?
What? 13th.
All right, we'll see.
You need to go, and I want that.
I went last night. The Monday night they had a Mookie head. They had his mother throughout the first pitch. It was really kind of funny. It was neat. And then he hit a home run. And then he hit a home run last night too. Anyways.
Yeah, they showed the first pitch on TV.
Last night, no giveaway. Tonight they have a giveaway. I go on the only night. It's Filipino Heritage Night. And as much as I want to celebrate Filipino heritage, I got nothing. I went to the game. At least I got to see a win. Anyways, folks, we are going to get to Torah. But I will tell you, if people can come to Dodger games, they can come theoretically to a service or to participate in those things too. So that's why we're doing it live. And thank you, Harvey. And Harvey's on now too. I'll say Harvey's worked very hard to make sure that we could accommodate people. And we're going to do what we got to do, which is be a community, which is the theme of tonight's Torah portion, because it actually begins with the words, Atem NItzavim hayom. This day, that same word that we have throughout Deuteronomy, throughout Devarim. By the way, you notice I'm still sitting on the other side. I'm sitting in Tracy's seat. I'm not in my seat. My daughter Rachel is in my seat. She's home for the holidays. And so I gave her my seat. I gave her my chair, which is why there's a different thing behind me. It's not my books. It's closets. But anyways, I want to tell you, I hope that, well, I don't know if she's landed yet, but wherever Tracy is, we do talk about this portion with our kids, with our families, because this portion tells us right now, with our community, you stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your tribal heads, your elders, and your officials, all the men of Israel, your children, your wives, even within your camp, even the stranger within your camp, from wood chopper to water drawer, to enter the covenant of the Lord your God, which the Lord your God is concluding with you this day, Hayom, with all of its sanctions, to the end that he may establish you this day, Hayom, as his people and be your God, as he promised you and as he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Shulman's, don't worry, we just started. We're at the very beginning of this portion. This day, Hayom, this day, which is, of course, delivered by Moses to the people after he's gone through the rest of the book of Deuteronomy. Here we're in chapter 29 of Deuteronomy, almost chapter 30. We're in the home stretch of Deuteronomy. We're in the last days of Moses saying goodbye to the people. He's done a prologue telling the people how they got to where they are. He told the people the laws, all these laws, including repeating the 10 commandments, repeating the laws of kashrut, repeating so many ethical laws and family laws and civil law. And then we get to this epilogue, which kind of started last week with Kitavo. And as we go into the last few weeks, now that you have the law, now that you know where you came from, now this is where you're going. And we read last week in Kitavo this warning that if you break the law, bad things will happen to you. All those plagues that you saw the Egyptians have, you're going to get them. And so we have a warning. We also have a blessing. And this week, Moses is kind of bring it home. And then the last couple of weeks. But as I said, this is a very short portion, which is why, again, we want to make sure everyone's here for these words from NItzavim. NItzavim literally comes from, this is what I wanted to show you. NItzavim comes right here. You stand this day. That's what the word NItzavim, not this day, that's Hayom, but you stand is at 10 NItzavim, that you're here, you're present, you're in this moment right now. And this idea of creating this community of everybody, of the leaders, of the people who have the most menial job, whether they're wood choppers or water drawers, doesn't matter. Everyone is equal in this community. Everyone is a part of this community because the covenant is what binds the people together. It's not a hierarchical structure. It's a structure that binds everyone together. Everyone is connected to this covenant, to this community, and it's men, women, and children. And as it says, even the strangers, even the people who are not Israelites, who are part of your people, part of your camp, part of your community, they're part of this covenant too. So it's a very interesting concept that it's, again, everybody is a part of this covenant, not the wealthy, not the leaders, not the princes, not the chiefs, not the priests. Everybody is a part of this covenant. And of course, it goes back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is a promise. And again, it's the promise for the land, but it's also, as we're going to see, a promise to be part of this community, this covenant, to follow the rules, to follow the law, to follow the Torah together. And you're going to see that that's really the focus on it. Not so much the land part is definitely there, but it's also the fact that what binds us to the land, what binds us together is the law, is the covenant, is the text. So it says, I make this covenant with its sanctions, not with you alone, but both with those who are standing here this day before the Lord our God, with those and with those who are not with us here this day. So it says, again, getting to some great parts, but this idea, it's not just with you who are here, but with those who are also not here, which could be, it could be understood as the people who've already come before us.
What about us? Could it be us here present?
Of course, it could be us. And as we read this text, kind of think about where we're going with this, because on one hand, it says right here, it goes back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this covenant is reinforcing the covenant of our ancestors, of those who came before us. But really, as you look at this, really think about if it's really now more with us, the people of the future, which is, again, what's so amazing, that it's not just those who are in that moment right there on that day, but who are every day in this covenant of our people. So again, some similarities to last week's portion. Well, you know that we dwelt in the land of Egypt and that we passed through the midst of various other nations. So when we left Egypt, we were in Egypt. And then when we left Egypt, we also passed through other countries. And you've seen the detestable things and the fetishes of wood and stone, silver and gold that they keep. So you've seen the idols of Egypt, and you've seen the idols of the Moabites and the Midianites and the Ammonites and all those people that we wandered through. You've seen those. And of course, they're going to see the fetishes and the things of the Canaanites too. Perchance there is among you some man or woman or some clan or tribe whose heart is even now turning away from the Lord our God to go and worship the gods of those nations. Perchance there is among you a stalk sprouting poison weed and wormwood. When such a one hears the words of these sanctions, he may fancy himself immune, thinking, I shall be safe, though I follow my own willful heart, to the utter ruin of moist and dry alike. So again, what it's saying here is that there's some people amongst us, even now, who might be saying, man, this covenant doesn't apply to me. I'm not going to worship God. I'm going to worship these other gods that everyone else worships. And of course, what it's saying here in the text is that those people are going to be a problem to you. They are like a weed in your community. They are going to cause problems. The Lord will never forgive him. Rather, the Lord's anger and passion rage against that man till every sanction recorded in this book comes down upon him. And the Lord blots out his name from under heaven. The Lord will single them out of all the tribes of Israel for misfortune in accordance with the sanctions of the covenant recorded in the book of this teaching. B'Sefer HaTorah Hazot, this Torah. Which again, is it the whole Torah or is it the book of Deuteronomy? It doesn't really matter. The point is that you've been warned, and the people who are responsible for this, they're going to be singled out. So there does seem to, again, be the reality that it has a cumulative effect, because watch what happens. Later generations will ask, the children who succeed you. So here definitely is talking about the future. And foreigners who come from distant lands and see the plagues and diseases that the Lord has inflicted upon that land of Israel. All its soil devastated by sulfur and salt, beyond sowing and producing. No grass growing in it. Just like the upheaval of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim, which the Lord overthrew in his fierce anger. All the nations will ask, why did the Lord do thus to the land? Wherefore that awful wrath? Why was God so angry? Why did God's anger turn against the people so badly?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
If you go up a little bit, I know about Sodom and Gomorrah, but what about Admah and
Zeboim? Yeah. Well, these are the cities of the plain. These are ones that we don't necessarily talk about that much in the Torah, especially again when we go back to the book of Genesis. But it does say the cities of the plain, and so it does talk about destruction happening round about the land of. So
it is not mentioned in Genesis. I didn't think it was.
Well, they're not, though. They are mentioned. They are mentioned in Genesis, but not in that text. They're mentioned as Canaanite or as areas that that were inhabited by Canaanite kings. And when Abraham goes and fights to recover Lot, and when Lot's kidnapped by the kings of the east, it's the war of the kings, the battle of the 5 kings versus the 4 kings.
Okay.
And those communities are mentioned in that list. So we know about them. We know that they're.
But we didn't know they were destroyed.
No, other than, again, it says that round about the cities of the plain. So it seems as though, again, they're engulfed in this catastrophe that overtakes Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, the interesting thing is we really don't Sodom and Gomorrah are mentioned, but what's interesting is we really don't read about Gomorrah's sin. We read about Sodom with the angels and Lot. We read about Sodom. We don't really read about Gomorrah, right? So, we assume that the same stuff that was going on in Sodom was what was going on in Gomorrah, but there's an interesting midrash about that. I don't know how we got, it's an interesting midrash from the standpoint of the rabbis were also a little confused by why why we have a discussion about cities that we really don't know much about. And the rabbis actually said the sin of Sodom was homosexuality. The sin of Gomorrah was lesbianism. So they included a little bit about them, only from the standpoint of, again, maybe there was something that those guys did that was different than Sodom, but similar, but essentially the same, as we would say. Similar, but different, but not completely different, I guess. So that being said, hold on a second. We have again, people will hear about this, and then people will be told, because they forsook the covenant that the Lord God of their fathers made with them when he freed them from the land of Egypt. They turned to the service of other gods made with them when he freed them from the land of Egypt. They turned to the service of other gods and worshiped them, gods whom they had not experienced and whom he had not allotted to them. So the Lord was incensed at the land and brought upon it all the curses recorded in this book, which again were recorded in the last portion, Kitavo. So the curses happened, at least again in the future, they've happened. And then when people look at it, they'll say, oh, they were warned. They were warned that this would happen. And so it's not that God just destroyed them and didn't give them warning. God gave them warning, and they didn't listen. And this is what the punishment was. The punishment was that this story that you know about, that even the Gentiles know about, they were warned. They had a chance. They had a chance to do the right thing, and they couldn't do it. And again, what's the thing that they're doing? Worshiping other gods. So the Lord uprooted them from their soil in anger, fury, and great wrath, and cast them into another land, as is still the case. So again, this is in the future, people talking about the Israelites. Concealed acts concern the Lord our God, but with overt acts, it is for us and our children ever to apply all the provisions of this teaching, which again is included in that chapter, but is really kind of not necessarily a great break. But again, the Christian scholars who put the break here put the break at the end of verse 28 to end chapter 29. But look at the next line too. So again, concealed acts, that's God will know about those. But overt acts, it's for us and our children to apply the provisions of the teaching. So it's actually saying that enforcement of this is actually going to come upon you. It's going to come upon the people, because they're going to know, especially when people are overtly worshiping other gods. Things that are going on in a person's heart, well, we've got to leave that to God. We won't necessarily know about that, but overt acts we'll know, and we have to essentially enforce them, because otherwise we're all doomed. And again, the verses actually continue, which again, really not a great break here. When all these things befall you, the blessing and the curse that I've set before you, and you take them to heart amidst the various nations to which the Lord your God has banished you, and you return to the Lord your God, and you and your children heed his command with all your heart and soul, just as I enjoin you upon this day, then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and take you back in love. He will bring you together again from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you. So this is the idea that there will be a restoration, which is why the break is there. The break is there because there's a natural transition from, okay, and when all this stuff happens, then it happens. And then there'll be a good thing that'll happen, which is why they broke it there. But in reality, it's all connected to this, this kind of previous idea, which, I mean, technically you could have broken it, here or whatever. But the point is it's a continuation of this idea that there will be a time when you will be tossed out of the land, but then you'll be returned. which again, we kind of read about already, and we do know that this happened. It's difficult to, again, even if this happened after the Babylonian exile, and the book of Deuteronomy was edited or put together afterwards, it's still very strange that the prophecy happened even more so during the 1920s and 30s and 40s as Israel was reestablished. And the fact that, again, people came back from all these different places. And what does it say here? The Lord will restore your fortunes and take you back in love. And this idea that God will allow the people to come back in love, in God's mercy and God's love, which is rachem, God's compassion. And again, the word here that's repeated, or the root that's repeated here, it says Vishav Adonai, the Lord will restore you or return you et shavutecha, which is, it is your restoration or your return or your teshuvah. This is the root for teshuvah. So it's a really powerful portion to be reading at this time of year as we think about teshuvah, as we think about return, because this Torah portion is really about the people being returned back to the land, which is an enormous teshuvah. It's a teshuvah on a national level. It's return and a repentance on a national level. And here's what it says: even if your outcasts are at the ends of the world, from there the Lord your God will gather you. From there he will fetch you. And the Lord your God will bring you to the land that your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. And he will make you more prosperous and more numerous than your fathers. So your restoration is not only going to be in the land of Israel, but it's also going to be so great that you'll become more powerful than when you were last there, which is kind of amazing because it did happen during the time of the exile, the Babylonian exile, when the people returned with the Persians allowing them to return, rebuilding the temple, rebuilding the community, that eventually that community became much bigger. We don't know how big the Jewish community was on the eve of the Roman destruction, 500 years after they returned with the Persians. 500 years later, we know the second exile, the second diaspora, the second destruction of Jerusalem. And at that point, there were millions. We know that there were millions of Jews. We don't know whether it's 5 million, 8 million. I mean, the numbers go up to 10 million Jews by that point. So we assume that the Romans actually killed about 1.5 million Jews during the rebellion. I mean, a minimum of 1.5 million Jews, if you add up from Josephus's numbers and kind of the numbers that the Romans gave, 1.5 million Jews died just in that war, which, you know, could have been 10%, 15% of 20% of the Jewish community in the land of Israel. So this is enormous numbers. And so that happened then. And of course, when we came back after our current exile, when we came back in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and reestablished Israel, Israel today, now 70 years later, there's about 8 million people in Israel today. The numbers in 10, 15 years from now, depending on which demographics you look at, there'll be 10 million people living in the land of Israel. 10 million.
How about in the whole world? How many Jews in the whole world now?
Well, remember, Joyce, when 20 years ago, there were still more Jews in America than in Israel. That's not the case anymore. There are now more Jews in Israel
Really?
than there are in America. So that's changed just in the last 20 years. Only since the 2000s does that happen.
So there's less than 8 million Jews in the United States?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's less than 6 million.
Really?
Oh my.
So the numbers of Jews in the United States has stayed roughly close to about between 5.5 and 6 million Jews since the 50s and 60s.
So we're not multiplying and we're intermarrying.
And we're not having as many kids. So we're not replacing ourselves in the United States. Depending on the numbers, again, depending on whose numbers you look at, we're staying close or decreasing. In Israel, the population's increasing, and some interesting demographics on Israel, and even some people have talked about a population time bomb in Israel that's going to hurt Israel. The reality is, I saw some interesting information, but that's actually not true. That Israel's population is actually, Jewish population is increasing very fast. And we're looking at numbers that, again, would put Jewish community in Israel eventually significantly more than the United States. And so, maybe in about another 30 or 40 years, Israel will have twice as many Jews as the United States. And at that point, when United States is not like, right now it's close, and there's still a power dynamic where there's a tremendous amount of wealth and power in the United States. As that becomes less and less, as the Jewish community becomes less and less a factor the Jewish community becomes less and less a factor in the United States, and becomes less and less a factor vis-a-vis its relationship with Israel, it'll always be the largest diaspora community. But when there's twice as many Jews in Israel as there are in America, it's probably going to be more of Israel directing what Jewish life is like in our country than the way it's been up until now, where again, we have limited influence in America as far as religious context. But when it comes to politics, American Jewish community is very powerful, and Israel really does depend on us, and obviously depend on the evangelical community too, tremendously for support. But as Israel becomes a larger and more powerful country, at some point, Israel is going to become less dependent on American Jews, and probably to some extent less dependent on any country, which will be a good thing for Israel's self-sufficiency, and for Israel's own manifesting its own power and its own control over its future. The great thing, of course, is that the alliance between the United States and Israel is so strong, and that we have so many shared values. And hopefully that won't change, both on our side and on Israel's side. Hopefully that those values continue to be shared. But it will be interesting to see what happens as Israel becomes a much more powerful country. In our lifetimes, it was America more powerful and Israel less powerful. Now it's still roughly even, but shifting towards Israel. And then eventually, as I said, the balance of influence is going to change even more towards Israel's kind of controlling, and making decisions. And who knows? I mean, there is a hope, I think, in Israel, or a possibility that Israel's future, to some extent, will be to be really the religious and spiritual home for American Jews in a way that it hasn't yet been realized or manifest, which is that Israel will actually help support Jewish life in the United States. Right now, we're self-supporting, and that's good. But at a certain point, maybe Israel will take on a greater level of education and kind of connection to the way American Jewish life is organized. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And Israel does kind of take that seriously. They have a minister of diaspora affairs, and up until now, it's been more of a connecting point, but not a directing point, in the sense that Israel doesn't really help facilitate decisions made in the American Jewish community. But it might be the case that one day that it is. I mean, right now, and for the last 75 years, American Jewish community has supported Israel by sending money every year. Literally billions of dollars come to Israel through a U.S. Jewish generosity. What happens one day if it's going the other direction? What happens one day if American synagogues are literally writing out grants to Israel, asking Israel to help them with their education or help them with their synagogue life? It's possible, folks. It's possible.
The other thing that is continuing, the number of Nobel Prizes in medicine and economics, in technology, has been so prominent among both the Israeli population and the American population of Jews.
Yes. And I think as long as the U.S. universities continue to be the leaders in research and development, as long as American universities are still at the forefront. And again, many Israeli professors have been working in American universities. I mean, there's some great Israeli universities, Technion and Hebrew University, and there's Ben Gurion University. There's a lot of universities that have done have had some great breakthroughs. But as long as the United States continues to be the world, and we are the world leader in research and development, as long as that continues to be the case, my guess is that a lot of the Nobel Prizes will continue to be shared, even if they are won by Israelis, that they'll continue to be at least somehow connected to the United States. Somehow they'll be connected to the United States, and they'll be connected to probably, again, research and development universities in particular. But yes, as Joyce is saying, it still happens that Israelis and Jews, but specifically to get to Joyce's Joyce's point of how those things play out in America. That I mean, you look at someone like Daniel Kahneman, who was a psychologist, economist, who kind of was a pioneer in game theory, how humans make choices. He wrote a famous book called Thinking Fast and Slow, and he was a professor at Princeton. He won the Nobel Prize. Believe it or not, it's now been 20 years ago. He got it in economics. But he's an Israeli who is a perfect. I mean, he's only one person. I mention him because he's one of the more famous Nobel Prize winners. But it gets to Joyce's point of these Nobel Prize winners, even when they come out of Israel, are oftentimes doing their research and working with American partners. He shared the Nobel Prize with an American economist as well. So it's going to continue. I hope, I believe it will. So, and again, this is part of what this Torah portion is telling us, that God will make us more prosperous and numerous even than our ancestors, and that is the way that translation is for numerous and prosperous. Heitivcha, which is the word tov, goodness and good things happening. That is the in hirbecha, which is and numerous. So it's not just you're more numerous than your ancestors, but you're more prosperous. You're actually doing things that are helping your success. A good life, good things. I mean, that's the word tov, which again, prosperous is just as good a translation as anything. It's positivity, good things happening. Then the Lord your God will open up your heart and the hearts of your offsprings to love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, in order that you may live. And that's the words again, b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha, leman chayecha, that you could live. So this idea of living, loving, and having, again, your heart and soul, your balance, and the full totality of your existence in life and in love. That's what it says. And again, this is the hope. This is like the dream of what people should be like. The Lord your God will inflict all those curses on your enemies and your foes who persecuted you. So all those bad things that happened to you, they're going to then go to your enemies and to the people who made your life difficult. You, however, will again heed the Lord and obey all his commandments that I enjoin upon you. Mitzavacha hayom, commanded you this day. And the Lord your God will grant you abounding prosperity in all your undertakings. And again, that word, all the things that you touch, the undertakings, your work, but also the issue of your womb, the offspring of your cattle, the produce of your soil. For the Lord will again delight in your well-being. Tov, the tov, your goodness, as he did in that of your fathers. Since you will be heeding the Lord your God and keeping his commandments and the laws that are recorded in the book of this teaching, once you return to the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. And again, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha. So, and again, returning. You hear, which is again the Shema, like Shema, like the Shema that is in the book of Deuteronomy that we read. And in this Sefer HaTorah, in this this Torah. And what do? You return, tashuv el Adonai, that you return to God. You're acting again with a sense of teshuvah, of return. And here's the line, folks. This is the line that I love. This is the line to me that, again, these two verses, chapter 11 and 12. Ki ha-mitzvah hazot, asher anochi mitzvacha hayom. The Torah, this instruction, this commandment that you hear this day, it's not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond your reach. Lo vashamayim hi. It is not in the heavens. That's my line. That's the line that I love so much. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it. It's not in the heavens. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it. Nope. The thing is very close to you, in your mouth, in your heart, to observe it. That is the power of that lo vashamayim hi. It is not in the heavens. It's not far away. It is inside of you. It is literally in your mouth and in your heart. So this line here, it says the Torah is not a mystery. It's not distant. It's not with somebody else, right? Nobody has to be sent to go get it. You're not relying on anybody else. You're not relying on someone telling you, you'll never understand the Torah. It's inside of you already. You don't have to go anywhere to get it. And that line is so powerful. Lo vashamayim hi, because look, the next line is poetic. It's not across the ocean, right? Lo me'ever layam. It is not across the sea. It's not on the other side of the sea. Which again is some world that you've never been to, that is difficult journey to get to. That's poetic. But the powerful idea, lo vashamayim hi, that it's not in heaven, means that it's not even in God's hands. That is the revolutionary idea that we have in the Torah, and specifically in the book of Deuteronomy, specifically in the words that you just heard. Lo vashamayim hi. If it's not in God's hands anymore, if it's in our hands, then we don't even have to keep asking God for answers, because God's given us the answers. The answers are there. And the rabbis took this line so important, and some of you know what I'm about to tell you. The rabbis used this line, lo vashamayim hi, these three words, not in heaven, to justify their responsibility and our responsibility to understand the Torah and to live meaningfully by it. That we're not supposed to engage in speculation or, unfortunately, in many cases, as we know, putting ourselves under the power of some other person, some other system besides the Torah. Because the Torah itself tells us that God's not going to do that anymore. And the rabbis literally took this line, lo vashamayim hi. And when early Christians came to them and said, God's revealed himself again to us. And the rabbi said, no, it's already been revealed. It was revealed in Deuteronomy. It was revealed in the Torah. God said God's not going to do that anymore. God said in the Torah, it's not in heaven. So don't tell me that somebody just came down from heaven and said that they're the Torah now, or that the Torah doesn't need to be followed, or that they're the Torah, or that they're the way. The rabbis literally said it's already been told to us. Lo vashamayim hi, it's not in the heavens. So don't tell us that there's something else that we don't have, or that God can now change the rules. And they literally said that to God. there's that famous scene that we always refer to back here from the Talmud that we always have to mention when we read Lo Bashamayim Hi, the famous proof text that the rabbis challenged God. And when God said in the famous oven of Achnai scene, where one Rabbi Eliezer, says, I'm right, and I know I'm right, and God will prove I'm right. And God made the trees fly, and God made the river turn up the opposite direction, all because Rabbi Eliezer said, God, prove to the rest of the rabbis that I'm right. Prove to them that I'm right. And God tried to prove it to them. And the rabbis turned to God and said, quiet. You told us that it's up to us now. You can't interfere even in this situation. And Rabbi Eliezer, as you remember, maybe, was excommunicated and thrown out. Because the rabbi said, you cannot do this, Rabbi Eliezer. You cannot invoke God or miracles or do anything else to upend the system that God has given us to live our lives by, which is Torah. So even those things like miracles, and again, that is a direct challenge to anybody who came forward, especially at that time, and said, well, look at what this teacher just did. Look at what this Messiah just did. Look at what this deity just did. The rabbi said, it can't happen. God said it can't happen. And in the famous epilogue of that story, the rabbis actually finally have a chance to ask Elijah, right? The guy who goes back and forth to heaven. There's a scene where the rabbis actually confront Elijah and say, Elijah, what did God say when we said the Lo Bashamayim Hi? When we used God's own words against God and said, God, you told us it's not in heaven. And the famous scene is Elijah says, it's Ocheni Bani, my children have defeated me. My children have used their knowledge and their power of Torah to remind me that I can't influence them anymore, that they're now responsible enough and old enough, and now have the Torah, they now know what to do. And so God said, they're right. They're right. That is the rabbi's version, again, of this discussion that happened exactly at this moment, of whether God could remanifest God's self in the world, which is what Christians believed happened during Jesus and through Jesus, and the rabbis who said, no, God can't do this anymore. God can't do it for Rabbi Eliezer, and God will not do it for Jesus or any of this followers of his new religion. They said, God has given us the Torah, and it's now up to us, not up to miracles, not up to even God, to now change the rules. We have the rules. God told us these were the rules. God said there's not going to be any more mysteries. God said it's not hard. You have it. It's inside of you, which means you don't need me to interfere anymore. And this is the line that essentially says, human beings, Jewish people now who have the Torah, you're responsible. You're now adult. I'm not going to treat you like a child anymore. I'm not going to interfere. I'm not going to intervene, and I'm not going to change the rules anymore. So don't expect me to do it. You know what to do, and now you go do it. And this is the break that happens at the end of Deuteronomy, and to some extent is the theology of the Jewish people, which is that God doesn't intervene and interfere in the world anymore, that we know what we're supposed to do. We can do miracles, but we now have to do it ourselves. We can't expect God to do it for us anymore. God can't change the rules. So this is a very important concept in Judaism, and one could argue, again, one of the most important concepts in the development of Judaism as a religion, and what made Judaism, again, adhere to this idea of not having new prophets or new miracles or other things happen. This line right here. So, Lo Vashamayim Hi is, if not one of the most powerful lines in the Torah, it is definitely up there in the top. In my book, and again, for people who study Torah and look at Jewish history, it is so vital and so important. That's why I said portion's almost over, but man, if we didn't have this line, Lo Vashamayim Hi, how different would Judaism be? Because this essentially is, you got it, you know what to do, and it's not going to be a mystery anymore. You're now grown up. So those three words are some of the most critical words in the whole book, because they actually set forward, now the book is there for you. You've got the teaching. So, and it's beautiful too. I mean, it's not just powerful, it's beautiful. It's not up in the heavens, it's inside of you. It's not on the other side of the world, it's in your mouth and it's in your heart. And it finishes with this idea, which again, now that you know what to do, now that it's inside of you, now that I've reminded you that you already know what it is, Re'eh natati lefanecha hayom, which again we have in the portion Re'eh, which we read a few weeks ago. Re'eh, look, see, I set before you this day life and prosperity, death and adversity. You have a choice. You have the choice now. You have the law, you have the power. Now you have to make a choice. And the choices are between, on one hand, life and goodness and positivity. Chai v'tov on one side. And on the other side, what's on the other side? Death and badness, ra, negativity, and which they translate as death and adversity. Life and goodness, death and negativity and badness. That's the choice. Now, is it always black and white? Well, maybe not, but the direction that you go is oftentimes a choice between one thing and another. Sometimes we have a multiplicity. There's many choices in front of us, but sometimes it's choosing one way or another way. It's literally choosing which direction we're going to follow at that moment. And we have the power, we have the knowledge, we have the gifts. And now what are you going to do? I command you this day to love your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his commandments, his laws, his rules, that you may thrive and increase, and that the Lord your God may bless you in the land that you are about to enter and possess. So again, it's about choices. It's about the way you live every day. It's about the kind of life that you'll have. And it also is, of course, connected to the land. But the force of it, the thrust of it, is really in the way that you live every day. Life and death, goodness and evil. Those are with you wherever you live. But again, it is very important that you will be living in a land, and this is the land that you are to, this is the land that you're to have control over. So there is that sense of communal responsibility and a communal place, a communal home. It's Moses telling the people, you got to do what's right. And God wants you to do what's right. God wants you to live. So the choice is there. The choice is there, but we know what God wants us to do. If your heart turns away and you give no heed, and you are lured into the service, worship and service of other gods, I declare to you this day that you shall certainly perish. You shall not long endure on the soil you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness you this day. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life if you and your offspring would live. By loving the Lord your God, heeding his commands, and holding fast to him. For thereby you shall have life and shall long endure upon the soil that the Lord swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give to them. So
Beautiful.
the words, Lo Hashamayim Hi, it's not in heaven. That is the manifest destiny of the Jewish people, to take power, to take control of their lives. But this line, these words, choose life, can best describe what the Jewish attitude for life is, which is that we choose life, that we choose to live. And this is not about the philosophy. This is not about the law even. There's something basic here of what's the underpinning of Judaism. What is it that makes Judaism different? What is it that if we have to say to somebody, what does Judaism teach us to do? Which again, it transcends philosophy. There's no there's no need for big words. There's no need for theology. There's not even to say the word theology. There's no need to say what is the philosophy of Judaism. It's so basic. What is Judaism at its essence? It's choosing life. It all comes back to that. It all comes back to making daily decisions which affirm and are essentially the ones in the choices in our lives that are life affirming, that protect life, that guarantee life, that ensure life is in this world is able to flourish and to not be stifled and not to be extinguished. Because if you think about it, choosing life, what the Torah tells us, v'charta b'chaim, that you choose life, it means that, when you live your life in a certain way, which is making decisions that help you affirm your life, the life of other people, it means that, again, it does affect your philosophy. It does affect the way you treat other people or you think about the world. But it's the way you live. It is literally your attitude for what what motivates you. It's not about going to heaven. It's not that that's not a possibility. And it's not what I said. It's not like we don't think about the world to come. It is so essential that what we do in this world and what we do to make sure that people can live, it literally then, we have to make those decisions. Even religious decisions then come down to this, which is why we can break almost every commandment in the Torah, with the exception of killing somebody else. All right, basic, you can't use one life for another, but virtually every law of the Torah we can break in order to save a life. Because the default choice for everything, whether again it's Shabbat or it's the holidays, or if it's what we eat or all of those things have to eventually lead to life. But if the choice right in front of us is a life, we don't think twice. We do everything we can to save a life, which means, again, even breaking the Torah. So it all comes down to that. The default choice is always life. It's not, we're going to go to heaven anyway, so who cares? I mean, it's not, this is a big difference. And again, you can say it's philosophy, you can say it's theology, you can say, but those are just words. They're just fancy ways of saying, again, what is really the essence of Judaism? It is this idea of choosing life. And Rabbi Harold Kushner wrote a book called Choose Life, which is, again, one of his books about the guy who wrote When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Because, again, if you're summing up, and that's what he felt, if I'm summing up what Jewish tradition is, what Jewish philosophy and theology really is, it's this word, choose life. These words, these two words, v'charta v'chaim, choose life. So, again, it says so that your offspring, so that you and your offspring can live. Obviously, if you choose life, then future life can live too. So those choices, and for me, that is really the default thing all the time too. Is like, when it comes down to it, obviously we make decisions based on what we can do as Jews, what we can do to promote Judaism, Jewish education, all these kinds of things. But at the end of the day, if the choice is between saving a life and doing another kind of mitzvah, we have to choose life. We have to do the one that's going to save a life. So this is what is so fundamentally, again, why is this Torah portion so powerful, so short, but so powerful? It reminds us as we go into the high holidays, what it is. Why do we care about being inscribed in the book of life? Because more life is what we strive for in Judaism. Our own life and the life of other people, the lives of other people, the life of our family and friends, life of our country. All of these decisions are again motivated by this Jewish value of life. So, my friends, believe it or not, it's 8:00, not even 8:00. We've come to the end of the portion. I'm not kidding. Vayelech, we sometimes read as part of the portion. It's NItzavim Vayelech. And you can see how short Vayelech is. Vayelech is chapter 31, and it ends right there. Hazinu, the next portion, 32. So there's 30 verses for next week's portion. Literally, we'll get together and again for about another hour. But I wanted to finish today, and I'm so glad again that everybody was able to be on today, to be able to hear these words, Lo Hashemayim Hi, and to hear the words choose life, especially now, and to think about teshuvah, to think about repentance. We're considering these issues of choosing life. When we tried to figure out what we're doing for services and how to have services in a way that would be safe for everybody. And, look, we default back to this, to choose life. We never would in any way say, well, it's more important for us to gather together than it is to protect people's lives. So we would never do anything that we felt or that, the information in front of us would say was jeopardizing people's lives. And we've had services, as you know, we've been having Friday night services once a month over the summer. We had services 2 weeks ago with Rick and Addie, who are going to help lead services at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And we're working hard and making those services affirmation of life and affirmation of our values and our traditions, and to have a musical and uplifting service. At the service 2 weeks ago, Rick and Addie sang a song that I really love. And I was really, it's kind of like an illustration of why I really enjoy them helping us in the leading of services, because they bring nice new songs into the community. So about 10 years ago, this song was introduced to the Jewish world by a Jewish musician by the name of Dan Nichols. And Dan performs a lot of camps, Jewish camps. And he wrote this song based on this week's portion, NItzavim, which is usually, again, as I said, we read it at this time of year, usually as people are winding up camps and going back to school. This is a time when we're definitely thinking about teshuvah, and we're thinking especially this time of year about our community and how to be a community, how to be a kehila kedosha, how to be a holy community. That's what synagogues are called in Hebrew. We use Beit Knesset, which is the description of the building. Is a Beit Knesset is a house of assembly, or we say a Beit Tevilah, a house for prayer. We call the synagogue even sometimes a Beit Midrash, a place of study. But the community itself, wherever it meets, and again, there are synagogues, Orthodox, Reform, doesn't matter. There are synagogues that meet in churches. There are synagogues that meet in people's homes. There are synagogues that meet in airports. Wherever a synagogue meets, whenever the community is called, it's called the Kehila Kedosha. It's called a holy community. So if you see Kuf Kuf or KK, not just 2 Ks, not 3 Ks, 2 Ks, 2 Ks, make that very clear. 2 Ks. K with a quote, double quote in there, a quote, and then another K. That stands for Kehila Kedosha, or a Kuf Kuf. That's holy community. Kehila is community, and Kedosha is the holiness, right? They're like Kiddush. So this is a song that Dan Nichols wrote called Kehila Kedosha. Kehila Kedosha. Rick and Addie sang it last week. We'll play it. We're going to finish with this today. This version of it is a live version of it. It's not necessarily the best version. You can listen to it on Spotify. There's other versions of it on YouTube. What I like about this one is the words are up on behind him. So this is him singing it live, and we're going to listen to Dan Nichols singing this live. And as I said, hopefully this will sound good. I'm hoping that I can get a good sound out of this. It's not always the case, but I'm going to put it up there. So this was from 2013, this song. And again, not the best version of it, but I like the version because it has the words, and you can see it in the behind, and you can see it's based on this week's Torah portion. So this is Kehila Kedosha. I'm going to put it up on a big screen, and here we go. Hold it.
My friends from camp may already know this. And what's nice, again, there's a lot of repetition. So you're safe. Here we go. If you are a Tam, then we're NItzavim. We stand here today and remember the dreams NItzavim, we stand here today and remember the dream. Kehila, Kedosha, Kehila, Kedosha, Kehila, Kedosha, Kehila, Kedosha. There's Moses. He's just received Torah. He's bringing it down to the people. And he's the one who says, Atem NItzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Adonai Elohechem. You all are here this day before God. Everyone's here. From the people in the community who chop the wood to the one who draws the water. Everybody in the community who seems to have the most important job and the most basic. Everybody's here. And at the end of this section, he even says, even the ones who aren't here are here. Rabbi Michael Moskowitz suggested to me one summer that maybe that was you and I. Maybe we were there. And this idea of if you are a 10, if you are y'all back then we are NItzavim, standing and remembering the moment when things started to really get good for our people. And maybe by reminding ourselves of the everyday things that we do that have meaning and value, maybe that's when we start to build holiness within ourselves and within our community and build a holy community. So we end the way we started. Let's do it together. If you are a 10, then we're NItzavim. We stand here today and remember the dream. You sound really good. If you are a 10, then we're NItzavim. We stand here today and remember the dream. Kehila, Kedosha, Kehila, Kedosha, Kehila, Kedosha, Kehila, Kedosha.
Wow.
So thankfully we have voices like that are still writing and generating powerful Jewish music, Jewish words, taking words of Torah and giving new voice, new melody to them.
Thought this would be great if we could.
So folks, I want to
a lot of repetition.
so we'll see you guys, hopefully all of you. If not, this Shabbos will be recorded, obviously, but we got some special songs for high holidays that are going to be in there. And who knows, you may hear a version of that song this week too. But most importantly, folks, choose life. And that way we're all gonna have a great year, and we'll be inscribed in that book of life. So everybody have a happy, sweet year. Please be with us. If you've not gotten if you haven't gotten on and gotten tickets, again, it's the same ticket for virtual and for in person. We're going to send out the code to everybody so that they can log on, and if they're not around, they can or if they're not in person, I mean, they can be there virtually. I will tell everyone. Well, I can't tell everyone because some of you are watching on Facebook, so it's a secret. We will give you the code. Everyone's going to get the email with the code. Oh, you know what I can do? I can type it right now in the chat because everyone here will get it. Sorry, if you're on Facebook, you're going to have to, but everybody here is already registered for ticket. But I'm gonna show you the password for the virtual one. It's right up there now. Wait a second. Do people on Facebook get to see that? I don't know. Anyways, we're sending out an email. You don't have to copy it down. I'm just giving I'm giving everybody who's here a sneak peek of what the login
That's
is
funny.
for high holidays. So
I suppose.
people are listening. The Facebook people, no, there's just 2 people on Facebook, but who knows? We'll watch it later. Anyways, everybody have a great last moments of this year, and do what we need to do to make sure that next year is going to be a great year. And thank you everybody for being here.
We'll see you next year,
All
Rabbi.
right.
We'll see you next
Thank
year.
you.
I'll see you
Thank
in the
you,
beginning
thank
of the
you.
year. All right,
Thank you,
everybody.
Rabbi.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
everybody.
Bless
Thank
you.
you. Thank you,
Choose
everybody, for
life.
being here.
Choose life.
Choose life.
Love your joys.
Love
Joy.
you. Love you
Choose
back.
love too. Choose love for sure.